Hello, Vik Muniz. Thank you for having us today in your solo show here in Geneva. We can discover some of your latest series, all this magnificent collage. Can you tell us a bit how it all started?
Well, this is perhaps the final implement of a 6-year research into how to work with the surface of photographs. And I think I realized after a while that once I started producing images that were larger, I no longer worked on the surface of the pictures. When I was starting with photography, I had no respect for it. So I was just cutting it, burning it, doing all kinds of things. And I think I started creating this, you ritualize the photographic act as the end of the works. I allowed myself to work with all kinds of materials, from diamonds to garbage, make really big things like working with tractors, making drawings on the land, working on a microscopic level. But the end was always the photo image. I think 6 years ago I realized that, and I started, because of inkjet printers, it allowed me also to work more continuously, and I started this process of creating photo collages that were, you just work on the surface, reprint, rephotograph, rework, reprint, rephotograph. And what happens, you create many, many layers, and that sort of energizes the pictorial space. When you look at it, you don't know where the picture really happens. It's really challenging for the eye to actually follow it. And most of my work is in series, because it allows me to employ what I learned from one piece into the next, into the next, into the next. And I think this last series here in Geneva is the latest, and perhaps one of when you get to the top, when you know how to do something really well, and you start losing interest right after, right? It peaks out here in the show at Zipa's gallery here.
So we can see in your new pieces some game of trompe-l'œil. And do you like playing with the viewer?
I think from the very beginning, my work is always accentuating this tension between what is material, what's mental. It's just art is really for me at least, is the development of the interface between mind and matter, between consciousness and phenomenon. So if you have, when something physical becomes an idea, when an idea becomes something physical, when you play between these two notions, you sort of create a little space for the viewer to occupy. The viewer is not just dealing with physicality or something, or imagination. It's dealing exactly when one thing meets another. This is the place for art to happen. It's between idea and realization, between mind and matter. So all my works, I think from the 80s on, there's always an element of something, or an idea of something physical, that is juxtaposed with something that is an image of it.
You started more as a sculpture, creating this scene with some different materials. Do you see yourself more as a sculptor, as a photographer? How do you position yourself in art?
I would love to say that I'm a conceptual artist, but I don't really concern myself with concepts. It's more like process. So I'm a processual artist. When you work with ideas, and you have to work with substance. We have to work with material, because ideas, they do not survive without some kind of materialization. Maybe in the digital era, we see this phenomenon being, but at least for me, I think it's much more interesting when you have a sort of a physical counterpart. I started out making objects, something, but I was always trying to, corrupt the use of the object somehow. So when you look at it, you see the object outside its utility. So it becomes, in a certain way, you have to find a reason for that to exist. And that thinking, it leads you to puts you in an interesting path. But as soon as somebody had to be hired to photograph these objects that I was making, something clicked, and I realized that the photographs were as interesting as the object, and it just connected to the idea of the objects. Pretty soon I started photographing myself, the objects that I was making, and then I was making objects just for the sake of the photograph. And that's how the work started gaining the form it has today.
So after you took the photo, what happens to the scenery or the object you created?
I didn't care for it anymore. I was just throw it away. Yeah, it wasn't interested. It was interested in storytelling, just like making a picture that tells you how the object was made.
What attracted you to take part in our project?
Primarily you. I think, you know, it's interesting to think of something, doing something useful. You know, applied arts is an idea that peaked, you know, in the first half of the 20th century. You know, and artists, they thought they could design the world. It was a luxury of a generation that believed in the future. You know, we don't have that anymore. The future that we don't think of flying saucers or the Jetsons, and we don't have a future to dream of. But it's almost like ironical to think of useful things, and for an artist to be involved with the process. But it's not often you can pair with people who know what they're doing. I think it's, even when you make your own work, you're working with people. You know, the idea of specialization is quite, you know, ubiquitous. I don't print my work because I have a printer who can do it so much better than I can. So you start thinking about ceramics, glass, you know, leather, wood. You know, there's all these people who have spent a lifetime producing objects and interacting with the material in a way that you haven't been. So when you have a chance to work with somebody on a project, you know, the chances are that you're going to learn something that you haven't thought of before.
Okay, and we have a traditional question. Do you have a motto?
Yeah, I think never stop learning. You know, I think I'm always I'm a good teacher. I'm not sure if I'm a good artist. You know, that is a question of opinion. But one thing that I am sure of, because I could see it from feedback from people I have interacted, is I'm a good teacher. And there's a particularity about good teachers. They're always students at heart. You know, they're always trying to learn, and they know deep inside that they have as much to learn from their students than they have to teach. So I think I'm on my 4th decade of working as an artist, and managing creative stimuli, impulses is something that is probably the hardest part of my work. And in order to keep that alive, in order to keep that fresh and relevant, you know, you have always to be able to interact and exchange ideas with people who are living in the world right now. Be in the position of being a student, being in the position of somebody who has something to learn, I think it's essential for you to develop a long-time relationship to your own work.
Thank you, Vik, for sharing with us a bit of your artistic journey and some of your art pieces.
Thank you.